All right, you guys, here's another Cameron's Corner. The next segment is going to be like an introduction to how I think we should read the creation story at the beginning of Genesis. So, when I was younger, I tried to read the creation story in Genesis scientifically. That was how I tried to do it. And I think that's how we try to do it generally as a culture. We try to find correspondences or support evidence of whatever scientific theory that we are interested in creation. So examples I've seen and read about is, it says, let there be light. And I've seen a lot of people say, scholars and people trying to reconcile science with Genesis, and that verse, let there be light, corresponds with the Big Bang, because when the Big Bang happened, there was light. And so when God said, let there be light, that was him doing the Big Bang. He was setting it off. The bang was banged, right? So other people look at Genesis 1 and they're like, hey, look, man came last in the creation. It was like vegetation and animals. In fact, it was animals in the water and in the sky on day 5 first, and then land animals, and then humans. See, that's proof of evolution. That it follows the sequence of evolution. So the creation story supports that theory. That's another one I've heard. There's others out there that we don't need to get into. Okay, that I understand why people do that. Like I said, I used to do that. I've read books that try to put this all together, and eventually where I got to when I did that was like a dead end. Because let's just say all those things are true, it's problematic to assume that those are true, but let's just say there's that the Big Bang Theory and the theory of evolution and every other scientific theory we currently hold is actually like what actually happened, right? Which, by the way, as I said, is a huge assumption. The fact that our theories about how things have come to be have changed. Again, if you just pay attention to history at all, this stuff has changed so much. The likelihood that our theory, the Big Bang Theory and the theory of evolution, will change in 100 to 200 to 300 or 500 years from now is very high. I mean, if you think that the Big Bang Theory is the theory that everyone will believe in 500 years, that's not a winning proposition in my opinion. And same with the theory of evolution. It's just not going to be the theory in 500 years from now. Something else is going to come along and replace them in the same way that our current theories have replaced the past theories, and then those theories that we replace will replace previous ones, and so on. So we don't know how any of this stuff actually happened. Maybe we have a better idea today of how things happen than maybe people from 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago or whatever, but we're still pretty ignorant. That's just my take, okay? So anyway, let's just assume though it's true and that it corresponds, there's correspondences or correlations in the text of Genesis to the theory of evolution or the Big Bang Theory or other scientific theories, okay? And okay, so let's say that's true. Then what? So what is my point? What have you gained by that? Is that why God told the story the way he did? Was so that we could confirm the theory of evolution and the Big Bang Theory or some other scientific theory? Did he phrase it up? Did he tell the story the way it's told? And notice, I want to point out, even in the restoration scriptures and in the temple, the story remains largely the same. It's like God shows up, says, let there be light, let there be a heaven, and the earth beneath, and the waters above, and the waters beneath, and created of the vegetation and the animals and the blah blah blah, right? The humans in the image of God. The basic contours of that story are in Genesis and in the book of Moses and in the book of Abraham and in the temple. And so God keeps telling us the same basic story over and over again, whether it was he told it to Moses 3,000 years ago or however long Moses lived ago. I guess like closer to 4,000 years ago, 3,500 or whatever. And Abraham 35 to 4,000 years ago. And then he tells, and then in the restoration through Joseph Smith, it's the same basic story. Like, why? Is it so that people in the 21st century, in the 20th and 21st century, could confirm their theories of evolution and Big Bang and whatever else? Like, that's why he did it that way? Like, I hope that you can sense, like, the silliness, the ridiculousness of that proposition. Like, that there's no way that God told the story the way he told it so that a small group of people living in the 20th century and the 21st century who believe in the theories of Big Bang and evolution and whatever else could like justify those beliefs. That's not, he doesn't care about that. He never has cared. I don't think God cares whether you and I believe in the theory of evolution. I don't think he cares whether you and I believe in the theory of Big Bang or whatever. That's not what he's going for by telling these stories. And so when we do that and we find correspondence, there's value in it. I don't want to say there's no value. If it helps somebody like keep their faith and not walk away from God and find a way to move forward in their lives, fine, that's great. But we can't say that is the intent, because if God's intent was just to keep people's faith in the face of scientific theory, he could have told a different story, one that was easier to reconcile, one that was easier to make sense of, right? So that wasn't his intent. The intent is different, and actually the restoration scriptures help us understand what the intent was, and I'll get to that in a second. How should we read these stories? Now, Brigham Young, I want to address another thing that comes up. Brigham Young and Parley Pratt and other early leaders were like, our current stories of creation are like baby stories. They're for like babies. They're for people who can't understand the higher mysteries, and so it's a baby story. Now, Brigham Young and Parley Pratt and those guys may be right, like that maybe our minds aren't ready for the full truth. Like, I get that. I say that all the time, that we're not ready to learn God's higher laws and purposes and mysteries and everything. We're just like little babies to him. So there's nothing wrong with that, except the only thing is that if you believe that, then we still haven't learned anything from the story. What we do is we skip over the story. We're like, it's not telling us anything true, so I don't need to worry about it, and I'll just skip over it and keep moving forward. The problem with that is, again, God keeps telling us the story basically the same way over and over and over again, even through Joseph Smith in the Restoration, in the book of Moses and the book of Abraham. Like, he had a chance to fix the story if he wanted to tell it a different way, is what I'm saying, and he didn't. And so we should ask ourselves, like, why? What is it that God wants us to get out of this story that we're currently not getting out of it by trying to justify our scientific theories, or by trying to just skip over them because they're for babies? I don't think that's productive. I think we need to try to figure out why the stories are told the way they're told and what their purpose is, because God keeps telling the story the same way, basically. So one more thing on the science thing, and I lost it. It went right out of my mind. So maybe if I remember later, I'll bring it back up. So then how should we read it? If it's not science, or if it's not, to be skipped over, what's the point of these stories? Well, we do have some help. Like Bruce McConkie once said that the three pillars of the plan of salvation are the creation, the fall, and the atonement. And when you go to the endowment, the creation story takes up like half of the time you're there, so there's a reason why God wants us to understand it, and it's because it's a pillar of the plan of salvation, meaning like a pillar is something that holds up a roof, right? And if you remove a pillar, the roof will collapse, right? So the plan of salvation is being held up by three great events, and that's creation, fall, and atonement. So if you're going to understand the plan of salvation, you really need to understand the creation and the fall and the atonement, and you need to understand them together. And Bruce McConkie even said that the creation is told the way it's told so that we can understand the fall, and the fall is told the way it's told so we can understand the atonement. And I would like to just add that it's actually told, the creation is told the way it's told so we can understand the atonement too, not just the fall. That the creation helps us understand the fall and the atonement, and actually most of Scripture. So, and I'll give you an example of what I mean by that is the creation story is like the world building that you do in a story. So like at the beginning of Lord of the Rings, which is a movie I think many of you have seen, in the movie at least, they spend like the first 10 minutes of the movie explaining the world of the Lord of the Rings, right? And they have to do that because if they don't, you will be lost. So like there's a voiceover of Galadriel, you know, the elf, and she explains like the history of the rings and how they came to be, and that there were 3 rings for elves and 7 for dwarves, and there's 1 ring to rule them all, 9 for mortal men, and she explains like the past wars between elves and Sauron and Mordor and everything, right? Like she tells kind of this backstory, because you need to know the backstory in order for the current story to make any sense. And that's what the creation is. It's the backstory that helps us understand the rest of the story. Okay, so I'm going to give another example from Lord of the Rings to help illustrate this. So one of the best scenes in the Fellowship of the Ring, the first movie, is Gandalf is like this wizard, right? He's this old man wizard, and he's on this little bridge in the mines of Moria. It's like underneath the mountains, right? They're in a mine underneath the mountains, and they're trying to cross over a chasm, and there's this little tiny bridge, and there's basically like a demon. It's called a Balrog in Lord of the Rings, but it's basically just like a demon from hell, right? That's chasing them, and they get onto the bridge, and everybody crosses over, and Gandalf stands right in the middle of the bridge, and the Balrog comes to the edge, and Gandalf yells out to the Balrog, I'm a servant of the secret fire, the flame of Arnor, something like that, and you shall not pass, the dark flame will not avail you, flame of Udun, or something like that. He uses flame a lot in that speech. He's like, and you shall not pass, right? Now, in that's backstory that Gandalf is sharing. Like, why does he give that speech? And the reason why he's giving that speech is because most of us in this, and there's other clues in the story, and if you read the books, it's more obvious, but most of us, when we watch Lord of the Rings, we think Gandalf, if you're not familiar with the story, you think Gandalf's just an old man that knows how to do magic. But what Gandalf is saying in that moment is he's not an old man. He's actually like a secret angel, basically, one of the gods of Middle Earth that had been sent by like the higher gods to help humanity against evil. And that's what he was saying. I'm a servant of the secret fire, a wielder of the flame of Arnor. He's like, I'm not just an old man. Hey, Balrog, he's saying to the demon, I'm not just an old man. Don't make a mistake here. You might look at me and think you're going to battle with just some old human being who knows a little bit of magic. He's like, but that's not what you're facing up against right now. I'm actually on the same power level as you, because a Balrog and Gandalf were if you read the backstory of Lord of the Rings, called the Silmarillion, they're the same kind of being. They're both what they call Maiar, which are like the second level of gods in the Lord of the Rings. The higher order is called Valar, the second order is called Maiar. Anyway, so Balrogs and Gandalf and Sauron, the main bad guy, and then Saruman, the other bad guy, they're all Maiar. See, they're all on the same power level. So when Gandalf made that speech on the bridge, he was saying to the Balrog, I'm on the same power level as you. You better watch yourself. Like, this isn't just going to be a pushover fight. Okay? And so, like, the backstory helps explain, like, why Gandalf can, like, this little shriveled up old man can, like, fight with the Balrog. Now, what's even cooler about this is that in the backstory, if you read the Silmarillion, in addition to the Lord of the Rings, if you read the Silmarillion, which the Silmarillion is like the creation story of the world of Middle Earth, you learn that Gandalf was sent in an old man's body because to make it hard, he was supposed to be in disguise, like, so that the people of Middle Earth wouldn't just automatically like do whatever he said. in order to preserve their agency, he had to be hidden, like his true glory had to be hidden from them, so that he could only use persuasion to get them to do what was right, basically. And because they didn't want to compel elves and humans to do the right thing, they're supposed to lead them to do the right thing through like persuasion and influence and stuff. So Gandalf is sent in this like old man's body. Same with Sauron and the other. There were 5 wizards that were sent, and they're there to like help humanity, right? And Gandalf basically is like a type and shadow of Jesus Christ, because that's what Jesus Christ did. He came in like a normal human body, and he's kind of hiding his glory to help us, and to honor our agency, like so that if he just comes in his glory, it's kind of like obvious the test is over, right? If Jesus came in his glory, like when Jesus comes in his glory in the second coming, the test is over. Like judgment is come. Like it's the chance to like prove yourself and to prove your faith. It's over. So like Jesus had to come the first time kind of in a hidden form so that it doesn't overwhelm us, and our choices can still be like under the same, can be tested basically. Our agency can be tested in a way that it couldn't be when Jesus shows up in his glory. So anyway, the Gandalf fights with the Balrog. They fall off the bridge. They go down, and then he later on, he kills the Balrog, and later on he meets up with Aragorn and the other characters, and he explains that he chased the Balrog to the deepest depths of the mountain, and then to the highest peak of the mountain, and eventually threw down his enemy. And in the process, he died as well, and then he was brought back to life and sent back to Aragorn and all those guys so that he could help them defeat Sauron. I mean, that is Jesus Christ, you guys. Like, that is a type and shadow. He went to the deepest depths and to the highest heights to fight evil, to fight a demon, basically a devil, and to beat the devil. And then he died and was resurrected and came back to help people in his resurrected form. I mean, it's very Christian, okay? So, but you won't, if you think Gandalf is a human being and not like one of these Maiar, lower level gods sent to Earth, you'll miss the type and shadow of Christ, because you'll just be like, yeah, he's just some old guy doing magic tricks, right? But that's not the story. So you see, you need to know the backstory of Gandalf in order for that whole moment on that bridge with the fight with the Balrog to like, it fills out the picture and makes it more cool, right? And it makes you realize like how amazing Gandalf is and who Gandalf really is in the story, okay? And Aragorn is a type of Christ, and so is Frodo and stuff. So anyway, we won't get into that. This isn't about Lord of the Rings, although Lord of the Rings is amazing. But, and just, I'm not making this up. Tolkien was a devout Catholic. He helped convert C.S. Lewis to Christianity. And he even said that he wrote Lord of the Rings unconsciously in the first draft as a Catholic book. And then consciously in its revision, he had to go back and revise it. And he consciously, with intention, made it very Catholic. So it's a very Catholic / Christian book, right? So anyway, so the point I'm making is that the backstory really helps fill out the story. Like, so we're told the creation story. We spend so much time on creation in the endowment, and there's like how many accounts of creation? There's Genesis and Moses and Abraham, and then there's the temple account. And just, there are other accounts in the Psalms and in Job and everything that fill out, it's talked about so much because it's trying to paint a backstory so that you and I can understand the fall and the atonement, the other pillars of the plan of salvation, and we can understand the purpose of life and what's going on. Okay? So, last bit of context. The restoration also suggests that the creation story is a vision. Okay? In Genesis, you don't get that. Genesis just starts, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, blah, blah, blah. But in Moses and in the book of Abraham, the creation story is told as part of a vision that in the book of Moses that Moses is receiving. Moses is up on a mountaintop and he watches the creation story and the fall story. Okay, I mean, Bruce R. McConkie made this point. Moses, the book of Moses, is telling Moses' endowment story. Moses is on a mountaintop, which the mountain of the Lord is the temple, and Moses is clothed upon with glory, which is what happens to you and I in the temple. We're clothed upon with glory. Like the other videos I've given, that the robes and the names and everything is all about God putting his glory on us. And then Moses is shown like a vision, basically like a story on a screen in front of him. You and I are shown a vision in the endowment ceremony of the creation and of the fall and of the whole story on a TV screen, right? Or on a video screen. It's imitating what happened to Moses and to Abraham. Abraham is the same thing. Abraham is having a vision when he's told the story of creation, okay? And Bruce McConkie said the same thing, that Abraham was also going through his endowment, basically. Like, the way I would say it is this, because this is how Joseph Smith said it, was that you and I, when we read the experiences of other people, and let me point out, the brother Jared, when he was on the mountaintop, saw a story of the creation of the world too. When Jehovah reaches through the veil and touches the stones and stuff, he sees a vision of the creation of the world. So my point I'm getting at is, like, you read these stories, there's a pattern that unfolds. And Joseph Smith said, the point, when we read the stories of other people, it's great and all, but it doesn't do us any good. We need to experience it ourselves, okay? You and I need to have a mountaintop vision. You and I need to have a mountaintop experience where we see the creation of the world through vision, through the power of the Spirit, and so on, and where we're taught about the fall and about all that stuff that the brother Jared was taught, or Abraham, or Moses, or Enoch. Enoch has a similar experience where he sees like all of creation in the book of Moses. He has the same experience, okay? You and I are not supposed to just read about Enoch's experience or Abraham's or Moses's or the brother of Jared's. We're supposed to have that experience ourselves. And Joseph Smith said that is the purpose of the ordinances of the gospel, is to give us that personal experience. Most of us aren't ready to go onto a mountaintop. Most of us are like the children of Israel when Moses went up on the mountaintop, and the children of Israel at the bottom of the mountain, they look up and they see Moses up there. Well, they don't see him up there. They know he went up, and there's like all this fire and glory and power, and scares them. It's scary. They see Jehovah on the mountaintop. They don't see his body or anything. They see all the glory and the whatever, and they're frightened, so they don't want to go up. Most of us are like the children of Israel. We're frightened. We don't want to go up to the mountaintop, so we need to be able to just gradually 1 second.